We are 32 participants now. So welcome everybody. This is Pier Andrea checking in from Kota Kinabalu, Malaysia. We've got people from all over the world, so this is really a global meeting. I'm going to be the technical host for the session today, and some tech warm-up. You can see the slide. So yes, please, let's make use of the chat as much as we want and as best as we can. Let's use it to communicate, exchange, ask questions as we go along in the presentation. We'll use Menti in a bit for a quick icebreaker. And then later on, we'll have, when we go into breakout rooms, we're going to use Google Slides. I'll post you the link where you can find the slides to annotate the conversation in your room. Standard operating procedure for a Zoom meeting. Let's keep our microphone muted if we're not speaking. Great if you want to use the video so we can see where you're calling from, I mean the environment you're sitting. And a small disclaimer, we are recording the video. We're recording the session on video for later playback. Not everybody is able to join us at this time, but we also want to document this event and the other events in the series. So with this, I'm just gonna mute myself and over to Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pier Andrea. Morning, evening, afternoon from a very wet Scotland. It's really a pleasure to see you all here. What I'm going to do is introduce the agenda and then introduce the process a little bit, and away we go. So we're going to do a couple of small things. We're going to do an introduction round. We're going to have the km4dev relay. After every one of the meetings, we've been receiving a relay from the previous group, and we will have to produce a relay message. So we're going to be doing that in a few minutes. We'll hear from the previous session, which was about experience capitalization. This meeting is about online collaboration, dialogue, and interaction. And we've been, we being the D Groups Foundation in this case, most of us are associated, many of us are associated with it. We've been organizing some conversations around these topics. We had one on the 21st of May, a km4dev Cafe. This is kind of the second in that series, and we're trying to build a kind of an ongoing conversation to see what really works. So we're going to have a couple of short presentations, followed by group breakouts, and the idea is to capitalize on our experiences. So those of us who are in the previous group will know exactly what that means. We're going to come back after that round for a quick check-in, and we're going to have a social moment. And so please have ready a cup of tea or coffee or a glass of champagne or whatever you may have in your time zone. And we're going to have a km4dev toast. After that, we're going to go back into our groups again, and we're going to look towards the future. So we've been capitalizing, learning from our experiences. What are the changes? Where do we want to be 5 years from now? And then we'll conclude with our own relay message that we will send on to the closing event. I think we're ready to go. There's a couple more people to come, I guess, Pier Andrea. So let me start with the km4dev relay. Jorge, I believe you are the runner bringing us the relay.
Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm Jorge. I was facilitating the previous session where we were, as Peter said, discussing about experience capitalization with some of you and with many others. It was a very interesting one. And then, yeah, we came with a message that, well, we more or less analyzed what it is and concluded that experience capitalization helps us improve what we did. But much more than that, it also helps us learn about learning. And we need to measure this, but it is not just measuring. We need to understand how and why is it that it happens, and how is it that, how and why things happen in field. That's what we concluded.
Thanks, Jorge. So it's about learning about learning. That's kind of the advice that we all need to take to heart, right? For the, as we move to the future. Okay, good. So now we're going to do a quick, very difficult to do introductions on. I'd like you to go to a website called Mentimeter. The website is called menti.com. You can do this either on your phone or you can do it on your browser. If you could go to menti.com, and you should be taken through two questions. The first one is about who we are, who is in the room. And the second one should be about what we hope to bring and get from this session. So if you can go to that website, it should ask you to enter the code. and then you should just be asked to type something in. And in a moment, we'll take a look. So I like to spend just a couple of minutes doing that. We've already, as Pier Andrea said, been asking you to put your country on your Zoom name so we can see where we are located. This is a kind of a similar exercise, but we will be able to see maybe perhaps more easily what it looks like. So just take a minute. I hope you're all finding your way to it. I need to find the page. Yes, I'm beginning to see who we are. So this is Menti, who we are. I can see 15 people have told us who they are. They're all signing up here. We're seeing people from different places: Tajikistan, India, UK, Malaysia, Belgium, Switzerland, Ghana, the Netherlands, of course. So this number should creep up. I've taken my screen share off, so if anybody who's late arriving needs to, I can go back to, this is the website, menti.com. You can enter the code 161790, and that will tell you who we are. South Africa, Brussels. Okay. So nice to see a good mix. Back to the real site. It's always confusing. How many do we have? And after you've taken your first survey, you should take the next. There should be a second survey. There's 37 people here, I can see. Good. And there should be a second question that you're then asked to do after the first one. Yes, okay. So why are we here? Which parts of online collaboration and dialogue interest me most? This is a very fast moving page, my goodness. Learning, engagement, facilitation, there's people hunted tools, consensus. We'll share this back afterwards. I can see 24 people, 25 people have taken this one. So add in give us a sense about who we are, and we'll see what we can share this back afterwards. Engagement is really the core of it all, it seems, learning, facilitation. So if you want to keep on adding, I can see 32 people have taken the survey. If you're arriving a little bit late, there's still time, guys, to take your survey. If you go here, and then in about 1 minute, we're going to move on to the next part of the agenda. So warm us up, tell us, give a go to menti.com, enter the code, and you should fill in 2 questions. This is the one here about why we're here, what are we learning, what's interesting us most. It's very clear, facilitation is creeping up, it looks like learning is still in the middle, new ideas, consensus, finding out now. That's an interesting one. Yeah, so new ideas. Any more? There's 36 people, so quite a few people haven't taken the survey, but I guess that's okay. Let's have a look and see where we're coming from. Just double check any new arrivals here. Very good, we have a nice mix. 40 people have told us who they are. Italy now, USA, very good. And engagement, learning, facilitation, participation. Those are really the key words we're looking for today as we move forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move back and we're going to move on with the agenda. You may keep on, I think, adding your information as we go. What are we going to try to do in this session? We're focusing on collaboration, dialogue, interaction, how we do that online. And we're hoping to capitalize on experiences of all of us, but we've asked a few people to prepare a few short presentations to stimulate our interaction and discussion. So you're going to hear now 4 or 5 minute presentations. We will break into groups afterwards in the normal Zoom manner. As people talk, please post any reflections and comments. Just post them there, comments, questions, reflections. We can capture all of those and we can come back to all of those. And we will be producing some kind of a summary or a synthesis from this session that we can share back with you. So nothing will be lost, everything will continue. Who is going to be speaking? We've got 4 topics and 4 speakers. These 4 topics arose from an earlier km4dev Knowledge Cafe in late May, where we asked the participants to share with us what are the critical success factors to doing this well. And 4 areas came up, or 4 clusters. One is around platforms and technologies, and Riff Fullen from Helvetus is going to give us a few thoughts about that. What's his take on platforms and technologies, what works, what to avoid. The second one was around facilitation and leadership. And we've asked Nadia Van Holsen from Learning Moments to take us through that topic. And all of these presentations are just kind of conversation starters. Yeah. But engagement and participation is the third topic. There's overlaps, of course, between some of these, but you know, there are some differences. And the final one is trust and safe space. So Yasmin Claudia bin Humam from the World Bank, she works on a project called FinEquity. We'll talk a little bit about what they've been doing. And then the trust notion, the safe space, Saskia Harmson, who works for Oxfam International, will talk a little bit about how important those ideas are to online collaboration, dialogue, and interaction. So that's the order we're going to go. We're going to get the presentations now. Each of the speakers is going to share their own slides. We're going to be quite strict on 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask Riff, I think you're first. I'm going to stop sharing, and Riff will come, Nadia, Yasmin, and then Saskia. So let me hand over, stop sharing for a minute.
Thanks, Peter. Everybody hear me and see the slide? Good.
Yes.
So the first thing I should say is I'm not a techie and never have been, but I've worked with technical people for most of my career. So this is a perspective that is a mixture of some experience directly, but also of the wider context. If I can get the slide to move. There we go. So basically, for me, one of the biggest things is thinking about the users, because especially if it's something new for people, it wants to be intuitive. Also, if you're already using other platforms, you need to think about that, especially within an organization, but also, you know, often in a network context. And then also providing what is needed. And there, I mean, you need to think about. You don't need to have a lot of bells and whistles and different functionality necessarily, depending on what you're trying to do, and you can always build these things up over time. The other thing is from the software point of view, I would say anything that has a large community of developers to keep the software evolving, especially at this pace that things change. So that's an important thing to think about if you're thinking about hosting a particular software or using a platform. And then security and safety also need to be part of the assessment as well, because of course we all are exposed to it in the COVID context with this platform and others. It's an important consideration. And also the other thing to think about is when it comes to platforms, people who are very familiar with them, of course, are often very strong advocates of those particular platforms, and they may not be able to give you a picture that it's broader than one or two platforms. So it's good to try to get a diversity there. So if I start thinking about, well, if I wanted to be in a situation, if I was trying to support some kind of online collaboration, the basic functionality that most of us are probably pretty familiar with is email. Many different flavors of providing that service, but and it's not particularly sophisticated, but it's easy. Many people are in their career and looking through their inboxes all the time, so it's good to keep them connected, and it doesn't matter where they are or when they are. Good for communications, ongoing communications. You can do some archiving, but it is limited in functionality. And then if you're thinking about something more than that, then you're thinking about a lot of different potential web-based collaboration platforms and softwares. And again, my perspective is if you can define well what it is that you need to do together, and you may not know right away everything that is, but you can start at somewhere and evolve, and then think about what we might want in the future. What kind of capacities do we need? Again, the security and safety, and then is it future friendly? Difficult question to answer, but to think about if it is more likely to be able to evolve with the times or not. So then there's the question often of, do we try to integrate everything in one platform, or do we have several different platforms? And it's good to know that there are many platforms that do a lot of different things that are integrated, which is quite useful. Probably a lot of people familiar with Microsoft 365 or something like that. So there's a lot of integration, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for evolution of new functionality. We know that many new tools and platforms coming up, it's becoming easier to integrate these things, but it's still not easy. So it's a question. You have to decide, can you be better off one way or the other? And just to think about the potential future, even if you can't predict it. And then if I were to try to kind of pull it all together, I would say also what I think a number of other presenters here will say is that it's about people. You know, it's about the people that you're trying to facilitate the collaboration, the communication, the sharing of various kinds of information and knowledge. So to be able to engage people who are representative of different stakeholders in this group in the planning process and when it comes to technical solutions is a crucial part of it. And that, you know, to have that engagement as early as possible and as much as possible a co-development and certainly about making big decisions, that will also very much increase the likelihood that people will feel a stake in that platform, want to learn how to use it more effectively and be good champions for it. And then of course the financial and operational sustainability, you got to understand what the potential costs would be in terms of money and time. Time is probably the more difficult one often enough. And yeah, those kind of things need to be taken into account. So that in a nutshell is my suggestion about how to kind of approach this whole platform and technology side of things that are, many of us here and there have to make those kind of decisions. So anyway, I would welcome your comments at whatever point that comments are being held. I don't know if we go through the various presentations first.
Thank you very much, Vish. Rith. If you can share your slides, that's great. So even though when we talk about platforms, of course, we're talking about people online platforms. So let's move on to the next presenter. I think Nadia is going to talk about leadership and facilitation, which is all about people. So Nadia, please share us your slides. If you want to introduce yourself, you may. I'm not up to it.
Okay, I'll share the slides in a moment. I think I want to start with you all and with some paper and pen. Grab some paper and pen, and I have a question for you, and you do some drawing, because my question is, how happy are you with your online facilitation and leadership experience over the last few weeks and months? We were all in it. Draw your smiley. How happy is your smiley with your own leadership and facilitation experience? And then show it. We want to see it. We want an impression of this. Show it. Yeah, show it. Yeah, that gives an impression. It's coming. Your experience. There are smileys in all variations. Now, think about what is the trick to make your smiley smile even more. What do you need that your own smiley is smiling more? Take a few seconds and just write it down for yourself. Okay, I think we all have many, many insights, and each of you could be here now and share. So I'll share mine. I think we have to do some switches when we want to work online. And I mean, Riff just said it. We need to bring people and interaction online and not content. And there is a tendency of this content. There is a habit. There is somehow this routine of thinking about content when we go online. And this is really a switch we need to do, because it's people who interact and not content. So we really have to plan for interaction. And that was for me in the last weeks really the most important. And I mean, it's as in face-to-face. It starts with the why, with the purpose, clarity on this. And when we go online, the most important, I think, is that we have to structure it for online. It needs a rhythm, it needs a pace. It's like music, it needs a story. It's the same in the physical room, but I think online, it's even more important. And using the plenary for framing, but really the conversations in small groups, in breakouts, and Zoom is the revolution. I mean, those who use Zoom, they know why they use Zoom. Another one, and if we look at it from a leadership perspective, I'm convinced that maximum engagement needs involvement, and this is more than an email. It means reaching out. It really means involving people from a very early stage. And for me, it's more a question of attitude and of which role I want to give other people. How can I make them responsible for what we want to do together? And co-facilitation is one part if we talk about facilitation. And I must say, in my experience, I work a lot with liberating structures. And for me, liberating structure is the big game changer in bringing interaction and people online, because it's all in there. And with liberating structures, self-facilitation is just one of the purposes of the whole idea behind. So it's really more than just a fancy toolbox. It's an attitude. It's a guiding map and a lot of process knowledge. For me, this is important. So one more key message, and I think that's also an important one. For me, it's a creative challenge. It's not a technological one. It's working with, but also often around technology. We just had an open space this week, and it's fabulous what you can do with Zoom. You just have to think, what can I use with this technology? How can I adapt it to what I need to do? And often, yeah, paper and pen. I mean, we are sitting behind the screen, but it needs more. We can move, we can do a lot of things. And I always say, when I do a lot of trainings with facilitators, I always say, what do you love to do in the room? Just bring it online. And this is the creative challenge. And keep it as simple as possible. It's not about bringing content online, but it's also not about bringing technology and fancy tools online. It's about conversation. That's the most important. So that's it.
Thank you, Nadia.
No, I have one more thing, Peter, if you allow me. So, to finish it, what are your insights in 3 words? Please, your insights over the last weeks and months. Type it into the chat. What are your insights? Thanks a lot. Now it's done, Peter. Thanks. I give it back.
I'm busy typing something into the chat. Okay, but thank you very much. Ruth was telling us that platforms is really all about people. You're telling us that facilitation is all about conversations. And you mentioned the words, you had this switch, which was very nice. Is it switching on or switching off? We'll have to that one. Good. Let's move on. Is it switching content on or interaction off? What do we see how we do it? Good. Let's move to the next person. I would like to invite Yasmin, please, from the World Bank to share her screen. She's going to talk about engagement as the key critical factor. So Yasmin, over to you.
And I was just saying that I'm a noob at this, as my son would say. And I'm not sure if you can see my slides full screen.
Sorry, Yasmin, Pierre here. Can you maximize maybe? You go at the bottom right of the PowerPoint, and you've got the first icon. Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, this is a creative challenge, not a technological
Perfect.
one.
You're good to go.
So, thanks. I'm going to speak a little bit about community online engagement and participation, and I've been asked by Peter to cover these 3 topics. So just a little bit of background about our community of practice. We launched in November of 2016, have around 1,500 members around the world. And I think it's key to highlight that the facilitators of our community, who are consultants, they are technical experts in their field. And you'll see perhaps why this is so relevant later on. And we also have a dedicated communications lead with, a journalism background and a facilitation background in our community. So we have three types of engagements that we use D groups for. We put out calls for content to be included in other Finequity channels. We see ourselves as helping our members to reach new audiences. We have a we asked, you answered function, which helps us to collate materials from the community. People are always looking for tools. I think that's even something that came up here. And then we have our what we call D groups dialogues, which is what I'll be speaking a bit about today. And this is where we sort of get the engagement amongst our community members, have the conversations, take them online, the conversations that we'd usually have in a workshop or in a room at an event. So the three keys, I think, to sustaining engagement over time in our D group dialogues is to do them regularly, obviously, and they can be initiated either by our community facilitators or by members of the community who have a challenge that they want to discuss. We try to empower our members to take initiative. We do that in multiple ways, but I think the best way is actually our really close one-on-one mentorship with our members. We speak to them regularly on a one-on-one basis. We walk them through the process. We build their confidence to share online. Often people struggle with that. They reach out to us and they say, can you post this for us? And we say, no, you can post it yourself, and here's how you do it, and here's how we recommend that you get responses by phrasing your call to action in this way. And we also, of course, have guides that we've posted on our website, and I'll share the link to that later so people can go in their own time to learn. And finally, enhancing the value. So every time we have a D groups dialogue, we produce a synthesis from it. I think this is something that km4dev does as well, so that those who missed it, or those who couldn't quite follow along properly, or those who want to refer back to it later, have something to refer to. So to ensure inclusivity, I have these 4 points that I'll quickly cover. The first is, of course, to prime the community. Let people know it's coming so they can prepare their participation. We advertise on Twitter and D group and so forth, and we reach out bilaterally in advance to tell people, that we'll be doing this. We get co-hosts to facilitate these dialogues, members of our community who help to do things like send out an initial framing document for what it is that we're going to discuss. And then we, of course, because our facilitators are technical experts, they are helpful in identifying and motivating key participants. So we might reach out to someone behind the scenes and say, we know that you've produced this. It would be very constructive to this conversation we're hosting. Would you please share it with a few thoughts? So that's just an example. And finally, we do active facilitation. This is overlaps a little bit with the third one, but we, of course, also, it's a moderated list. So we prevent all the thank you, nice to hear from you from going out. We don't want to kind of spam our members and have accidental emails go to the group. Very quickly on what to avoid. This is based on personal experience from Finequity, just 2 items. The first is not building enough momentum. That's my timer. First is not building enough momentum on a single channel. We used to have a channel for each working groups, but we decided to bring it all together into one space so that people could really see the richness of what was going on and be motivated to participate. And finally, not using a channel that meets your members where they are at. We found that people need to get this into their inboxes. That's what's going to engage them. We tried Slack, for example, and it was just too much sign in for people. They weren't already on that platform. LinkedIn as well. People use it for a different purpose. People didn't want to engage in conversation in comment sections for things that were posted on LinkedIn. So we had to meet our members where they were at, and we had to bring it directly into their inboxes. I'll just end with this slide. I think maybe the presentations will be shared later, but you can, to see, some of the descriptions of how we do these things, I've provided some links here. So that's my 5 minutes up. I'm surprised I kept to time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. Really great. And indeed, we'll be sharing the slides and the links afterwards, so you don't need to worry right now about that. Some of the key points I took away, this notion, you talked a lot about empowerment, motivating, and this continuity. And at the very end, you talked about channels. That was interesting. We're going back to the platform, choosing the channels where the people are and making sure you don't overload one channel. So we're going to go to our fourth presenter. I'm looking for Saskia. I think we're already looking at her slides. Saskia, are you ready to go?
I am just unmuting myself. So thank you, everyone, and the speakers before me. I've been asked to speak a bit about trust and safety, and I want to use a particular example that I'm involved in rather than maybe theoretical concepts, which I could also draw on. But this is specifically about an initiative that's called the Charter for Change. And the Charter for Change was established in the run-up to the World Humanitarian Summit. So I'm coming with humanitarian experience here into the km4dev crowd, which isn't always as prominent as other development sectors, of course. And so why the Charter for Change is because it's an initiative that's led by both national and international NGOs to change the humanitarian system. Now, anybody who works in humanitarian know how vested the traditional system is, how vested the interests in the traditional systems are, and how difficult it is to reform that. Now, the Charter for Change is not a paid for, it's not a funded initiative. It's really international NGOs signing up and saying, yes, we want to be the change. We're going to make these 8 changes to how we fund, how we communicate, how we partner, etc. And local organizations, local national CSOs and NGOs that said, yes, INGOs, you shall make those changes, and we will be here to collaborate with you and help you to make those changes. So what's interesting, I think, about this is that it brings together a lot of, I guess, the north-south, as well as the vested interest tensions within the humanitarian system into online collaboration. So just to let you know, there's around 32 signatories, INGO signatories, you can see them here, and there's over 350 endorsers, which are mainly local and national NGOs and CSOs. And so just this slide, hopefully, that you're seeing is just an indication of the kind of issues that we're trying to change in the humanitarian sector. You'll see the funding, you'll see how we partner, transparency, how transparent are we as international actors about the funding flows that actually go to local responders in humanitarian crises. It's about not recruiting from local organizations when we as INGOs want to mount our own humanitarian responses. It's about advocating to the wider sector in terms of the changes that donors need to make or that the United Nations systems need to make, etc. So it goes on, equality, how we communicate, etc. And how we do that, the main vehicles that we use are online groups. In our case, it's facilitated by D groups. And these are the main groups that exist. So there's the C4C signatories, and it has 101 members, and you'll see that's only for the signatory representatives. So for Oxfam, for Islamic Relief Worldwide, for CARE, for CAFOD, CORDAID, you name it. There's also a group for C4C endorsers. So those are mainly the local and national NGOs, and there's 138 representatives in there. You will see already there's big discrepancy between who's actually in the online group versus all the organizations that endorsed it over the course of the years. Then we have common groups, and those are C4C advocacy, so jointly advocating towards the external system, if you will. That's jointly INGO representatives and local national NGO representatives, and others talking about capacity, and a coordination group, which is basically a mother group kind of trying to coordinate the whole initiative, which is voluntary, so that's interesting. That's also joint, local and national NGOs. So just a couple of things. I went into our membership, and I asked them what they felt was most important in terms of safety and trust. So this is straight from those we want to serve. And what came forward strongly was a sense of belonging and purpose. The fact that C4C is a collaborative movement that can demonstrate change by example. So really trying to be the change that we want to see that brings us together as local and international NGOs, but also the ability to build pressure through collective voice. And remember, all of this is done online. So although these things might not sound like online, this is all done through the groups actually, and through the relationships that are established through the groups. So actually influencing the UN's global humanitarian response plan for COVID-19, for example, influencing the grant bargain and donors' positions. They also mentioned that, yes, it saves time and resources to participate and therefore ensures wider participation. The fact that they know that they are with hundreds of local and national endorsers in here talking to these quite powerful INGOs is a reason for them to feel like they belong, right? That there's a purpose for them here. The fact that endorsers and signatories come together on equal ground, right? We're all part of the same groups. We're all making use of the same technology. Of course, we have different access to technology and time, etc. I'll come back to that. But what makes it feel trustworthy for them is that the spaces facilitate cross-learning. And again, this taking up advocacy comes back forward and forward time again. The endorsers group is interesting because if you compare it to the signatories group, there's a lot of people that are very familiar with online collaboration, online, email is their home base, if you will. Whereas the endorsers group, they're very remote and rural local responder organizations in there as well. What has really worked for them actually is to establish a smaller group, a task group, where they meet in face-to-face virtual calls, where they define what are the issues that they want to bring forward to the larger collective or to the C4C signatories, and then to bring that back into the wider online discussion group, for example. So whereas if it's only online discussion and trying to prompt stuff by endorsers, among endorsers in the open space that is this D group, that hasn't taken up as much traction as when they come together in a much more, simulating virtual or simulating a physical interaction and then going back to the bigger group. What works in terms of types of information is really the intelligence from the sector. Why are we all in there is because collectively we know a lot more about the humanitarian reform, humanitarian system than as individual agencies. The fact that we feedback from meetings, personal perceptions, notes that we've taken, it's not a very formal space and it's not an officially, mandated space by anybody. So we can come in and that's our safe space where we are together as a collective versus, representatives of individual organizations. Transparency was mentioned, the fact that when we do surveys when anybody does surveys from within the space, it comes back to that space and people are transparently informed about what the results are. What I'm seeing now is spikes. So there's the ongoing kind of information that makes it relevant for this particular community. But the spikes now, you will, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a lot of building on the Black Lives Matter, for example, and the inequities within the humanitarian system and the continued, funding going to the UN and large INGOs like Oxfam. There's a whole movement building around local actors matter. Actually, all this, talk about reforming the system and localization of aid, actually standing up and creating products together, creating campaigns together, and loads of local actors signing on to that. Ones that haven't been actively participating in the online dialogue before, but signing up and sending their logos and saying, yes, this is what we stand for, and thank you for doing this for us, was a huge spike in terms of activity. This is my last one, so I'll be quick, but what hinders is what people have said, and I think this might, some of you might relate to this, is that endorsers generally, local and national humanitarian organizations in this case, and also some smaller signatories, don't have funded policy committees. So you find that in the joint spaces, INGOs have funded humanitarian policy officers, for example, whose job it is to talk about this stuff, to scan the sector, to think about this, to network, to do, etc. And so a lot of the joint spaces sometimes are dominated by these international, humanitarian policy officers, which actually is intimidating for many of the local and national responders who are actually out in the field responding. So actually being able to manage that is often difficult. Added to that, the COVID-19 workload, as many of us have experienced, but especially for local responders in terms of their engagement in online collaboration has made it much more difficult. So affecting their ability, their well-being, their ability to engage. And again, while we are relatively cozy, here in the Netherlands, speaking for myself, relatively cozy in my attic, the hardships that local staff from local responder organizations face is much, much more significant. Lastly, I want to kind of talk about what they put forward. When these online spaces include too much jargon and too much sophisticated language or concepts at short intervals, it can be overwhelming and it affects their psychological safety. So often self-confidence is reduced when there is a lot of information or dialogue on the groups among highly informed people. So their ability, their feeling of safety and trust that they in themselves, that they have something to contribute because they're not as well aware of all of these things that are going on as perhaps internationally seated people are, but also their self-confidence that what they are saying is actually the most informed thing to say. So you can see participation being reduced. So if there is too much jargon, if there's too much sophisticated language, if there's too many people, which is interesting, Yasmin, that you say you have dedicated experts on financial inclusion that lead your conversations. In our case, we don't have dedicated or paid for communications leads. So it's really kind of, you know, a more organic engagement. But you'll see that when there's too much of these very specialist people that are talking about what they care about most, localization of aid, that actual trust and safety, sense of safety diminishes. And you see endorser groups going back into, you know, the spike in their own group where none of us kind of sit, and then putting out advocacy messages rather than passively engaging in that joint advocacy and that joint sense making, which is actually what the initiative is about.
Thanks, Saskia. Are you done?
Yes.
Thank you. You grabbed a few more minutes more than you were supposed to, but that was a different presentation. It was really interesting to hear about the momentum and the action. This was quite a different type of community that we see very often in the more classic development space, I think. And I really noted that this idea of common purpose and equality, but beware of all those power imbalances. Good. We are going to move on. I hope you're capturing things in the chat. We're going to go to a discussion phase now. I'm going to share my screen and take us back to the presentation, and we're going to move on. So like I said, please keep your, you should be seeing my screen now, I hope. And it's a very nice white screen with only 2 words on it. We're going to go into breakout groups, and we're going to try and dig deeper into some of these issues and questions that have come up. So we're going to do an exercise. My colleague Christian Binik is going to introduce the exercise and the questions together with Pier Andrea, I believe, I hope. Christian.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Peter. It's good that my connection is working at the moment because it was going on and off before. As Peter mentioned, before we go to the breakout session, is just to remind you of the procedures. We'll be using the technology. So you'll be put into a random group of people. We'll be giving you 20 minutes to have your discussion. And I'm just looking at the themes. We're going to show some, you need to show some leadership on facilitation. So you'll have to elect your own facilitator and also get someone to capture the notes, and we'll be putting the link to the Google Doc where you'll be able to capture the notes from the sessions in a moment in the chat box. But in case you're stuck in terms of leadership, I would say choose the 3rd person and the 5th person who appeared on the group as the 2 people who will be doing the hard work of facilitation and notes taking, if that helps. So just to remind you that we're going back, there'll be two questions we're addressing. The first one takes us back to the overall theme of our discussion: online collaboration, dialogue, and interaction. So what are the critical factors that most shaped your experiences with online collaboration, dialogue, and interaction? So reflect on that. And then we'll tell you to choose one of the 4 plenary topics and work on what specifically works or not for you. Or maybe you can also decide whether it is all of you deciding on the one plenary or whether it will be on one of the, at least we'll have to organize them on one of the 4 topics. So obviously you get the slides, the link to the slides are there, and you'll be using a mixture of technologies here. You'll be talking on Zoom, but you'll also be typing up on a Google Drive, and that the person taking notes will be doing that for us. I think we are ready to get into the groups. So wait for the signal where you'll be assigned to the group at random. So good luck with establishing engagement and interactions and building trust amongst yourselves as you go into the discussions for the next 20 minutes. And we'll see you back in here. Thank you.
And we're in breakout in 3, 2, 1, go. Yes, we're coming in. We got Mina came back, Sylvia, Peter Burry, yeah, slowly all coming back in. Well, not slowly, quickly actually. Filled up pretty quickly.
That was really cool how the groups just broke up at random. Some kind of software.
Magic.
Yeah,
That's it. Oh, yeah.
it's the Zoom. You can decide the random allocation or manual. With large group, it's just easier to do the random allocation.
Oh.
I
We're
think
back.
we're almost,
So
everybody's back.
welcome back, everyone. I'm just going to take this moment for a little bit of a social break. I hope you had a really good time in your discussions and really look forward to what you came up with. We're all back in the main room. So what we wanted to ask you to do, if okay for your bandwidth, is to put your video on actually. And then we will just have a toast to km4dev because it is km4dev's birthday right now. So if you have your drink by your side, put your video on. Let me see if I can see everyone. Yay.
Should I stop sharing, Sass?
Yeah, that's fine. So we can see everybody. You can put on the top right corner of your screen, you can click on and you see all the different participants in the room, which is great. And let's have a toast to km4dev. Yay, 20 years.
Nostrovia.
Chin chin.
All the microphones on?
Yes.
All the microphones should be on, huh?
Salute.
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 Cheers.
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 Happy
birthday to us.
While we're having this nice social do, which is really, really nice, I would also want to invite everyone to put in the chat box just a very short statement, now that you're all refreshed, on what advice would you tweet out to the km4dev community. So thinking about everything that we've talked about in the presentation, thinking about the small group work, can you formulate in your own mind just a small piece of advice on what you think the km4dev community either can learn from what we talked about, or what we think maybe we want the km4dev community to take up or advocate to others? Can be anything. So really anything that is your takeaway, if you will, from the sessions that you've been in with us. And so we make it both a social session as well as sharing our wisdom and our passion with the external world. If you put that in the chat, then we have magic happening in the background that brings it all together.
And then we tweet it also, right, Saskia? Multiple times. We retweet all of us.
If you want, if you don't want your statement shared out loud, then do indicate.
I have to say, Twitter did not come naturally to me. I had to receive a special prodding from my communications facilitator, who forced me to get a Twitter account and who gave me a workshop on on how to tweet.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not yet there. I still
And
listen
I'm not
to the
that
birds. I still listen to the birds outside. I'm not yet with tweet.
No, I used Twitter a lot and Instagram and Facebook, but I got rid of everything.
Yeah, but you reach a certain age, yeah.
And it took a while. I had withdrawal.
Yeah.
That I can imagine.
Yeah.
Did you do therapy for a while?
Yeah, talking to you.
Nice to evaluate that experience.
Which experience?
Move on, I think.
With
Peter's therapy.
Well, you go there. He's got a wonderful mansion. There's always something to do. Specifically cleaning up and mowing the grass, etc., etc. So.
Cutting trees and planting trees.
And his wife is a wonderful cook, and it's.
Hey, this is publicity. We are not a commercial company here.
No. But you should all look for Bazziganta in Italy. And
so everybody, sorry to break up the conversation. We need to move on a little bit. We've got another 15 minutes. So keep on chatting in the chat. I'm sharing a slide. Saskia, did we get some really great advice? I guess we come back to it later. Jorge's going to draft now a piece of advice. We do have another quick assignment for the group, if you still have energy. Christian, are you around still?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you introduce us back into our next group? We're going to do a very quick group, probably less than 10 minutes.
Okay, that's the question 3 we had. Okay, as you can see, the time really goes by very fast when you're in the breakout session. So question 3 is about looking forward. Looking 5 years forward from now, which specific changes in terms of our knowledge, attitudes, and skills or practice will most enhance the ways we collaborate and interact? And this is really now future looking. One piece of advice from each of the group of the participants on the breakout group to start off with, and maybe we'll move faster than we did in the past sessions. So again, I think there's a new link that will be pasted on the chat for entry of the groups in these for these breakout sessions. Pierre-Andrea has already pasted it in the chat, so find someone to take notes, or you can also all click on the link and add as you go through with your discussions. I think we're ready to break into the groups again at random.
And we go in 3, 2, 1. See you later. Yeah, people are coming back in. I think we're probably all back now. Yeah.
So everybody's back. I hope you had a lot of nice discussions and nice interactions. I'm sure you've been collecting a lot of ideas. So I would like to ask all of you for one small assignment last. I would like all of you to open your chat page, but don't write anything in it. So I'm going to post a question. It is there, you can see it. I would like you to think about what can you say here, and I would like you to start writing your answer in the chat itself, but don't press enter, so don't send it yet. Just think a little bit, write your idea, your tasty idea or insight that you take away from this session, and wait a few seconds. And I'm going to wait for a minute, and then when I say 1, 2, 3, you press enter. All right? And then we're going to see all of these great ideas that you are collecting appearing all at the same time. This is what they call a chat wave. So we're going to do it together. So start thinking, start writing, but don't press enter. Those of you who have a screen, I can see that you are very concentrated, thinking very hard. Yeah, I don't see your fingers typing, but I hope some of you already are. Don't press enter yet. Aha, I see some fingers up. Who was that? Joel. So you're ready. All right. Don't press enter yet. And then we give ourselves 20 seconds, Pierre. I don't hear you.
I think we're good to go. Shall we do
right.
3,
1, 2, 1. Press. Send.
Oh my God. Oh my God. What's that? This is popcorn.
More or less. Send all your ideas. What do we get out of this session?
Is this like 100 monkeys on typewriters, or what is happening?
Well, how many we are? 42.
So should we compare it to the COVID curve as well?
Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm not going to read all of this because it's a bit too much, but you have it all on the chat. Make sure that you save this file. That's much better than me sending it or anything. But yeah, thanks a lot. I think this has been a very fruitful session. I think we got a lot of ideas from all of you. Thanks a lot. Peter.
Thanks, okay, good. Okay, so we have about 10 seconds left. What I want to do is just remind you that the closing session starts in half an hour. You can still register if you haven't registered. We are going to tweet out our relay piece of advice. Jorge has been reading all of your chat comments. Jorge, what will you send out on our behalf?
Yeah, we're going to say, I cannot write it, but we're going to say something like engagement builds inclusion and impact. A short summary. It is a bit difficult to get all of your ideas, but all of you are talking about engagement and the importance of focusing on people, not on the content, and of course, including everyone and leading to impact. So a sentence like that.
Thanks, Jorge. That was nice. And that I think the inspiration came from somebody's chat earlier. Good. And then I would like to thank everybody We started this conversation back in May with a kind of a pre-km4dev cafe. We've had the conversation now. We propose to continue that conversation again later this month. So we'll be going to an e-conference format to see if we can dive deeper. We will come back to you with more information on that. I'd like to thank Pier Andrea for all the technical setup. I'd like to thank Jorge and Christian for their facilitation of different sections, and Nosheen for wonderful tweeting out and tweets. And our 4 speakers, Rif, Nadia, Yasmin, and Saskia, thank you so much for preparing those tasty takeaways. And I wish everybody a great weekend. Thank you so much for participating. We will share on all the great things that you've shared with us. So many, many thanks, everybody, and see you in half an hour for most of us, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Great, guys.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks a lot.
Great seeing so
Thanks,
many.
Peter. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.